Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, we travel back to the time of myths and gods, where Olympus towered above the clouds, and human destiny hung by invisible threads. At the heart of this tale stands Zeus, ruler of the skies, and humanity, bound not by weapons or blood, but by unseen chains of fate, choices, and promises. The air was young, the mountains stood like guardians, untouched by the weight of ambition. Rivers danced freely, carving paths of silver through green valleys. The earth breathed softly, cradling mortals in her generous arms. In those early days, humanity was small, yet unburdened by fear. They gathered fruits, sang by fires, and told stories to the stars. The sky answered with gentle rains, guiding their crops to grow. Every dawn was a gift, every dusk a promise of tomorrow. Mortals did not yet know boundaries, for the world seemed endless. Children laughed in fields without worry of hunger or strife. The seasons turned like a patient wheel, steady and kind. The gods, from their lofty thrones, watched with quiet interest. Among them, Zeus sat highest, his gaze both stern and tender. He admired their joy, their innocence, their daring hearts, but he also saw shadows forming in their restless dreams. For mortals were curious, and curiosity carried fire. They reached beyond what was given, always searching for more. They whispered of shaping mountains, taming seas, capturing stars. Their voices rose like sparks, small, yet impossible to ignore. Zeus leaned forward on his throne of clouds. The murmur of humanity reached him like music and warning. He was father to the sky, keeper of law, bearer of storms. Yet in their laughter, he heard echoes of risk. Mortals, though fragile, held within them an untamed hunger, a hunger that could build wonders or bring ruin. At first, Zeus allowed their freedom to flow. He gave them winds for sailing, rains for harvest, fire for warmth. The gifts were received with songs and gratitude. Altars rose in honor, smoke curling toward Olympus. But soon gratitude faded into habit. Prayers became fewer, promises more fragile. Mortals forgot the balance that bound them to earth and sky. They took, but rarely paused to give. Still, in these earliest days, the bond was not yet broken. The world seemed wide enough for endless mistakes. And Zeus, though wary, chose patience over wrath. He saw their laughter echoing across valleys. He watched them dance beneath stars that shimmered like gems. For a time, he let the world remain untouched, a garden of freedom, delicate and wild. The gods spoke quietly of what they observed. Athena admired mortal courage, their thirst for wisdom. Hermes laughed at their clever tricks and bold attempts. Hera, ever cautious, warned that small fires grow into storms. But Zeus kept his silence, weighing their words carefully. He remembered the titans, the battles, the price of chaos. He would not chain mortals with force. Not yet. Instead, he studied them as a father studies a child. Every step they took revealed both beauty and danger. He loved their songs, their offerings, their fragile bravery. Yet he feared the road they might choose. Still, the world was whole in those days. The chains of law and promise had not yet been forged. Mortals lived as if time would never end. Zeus lingered in the clouds, silent, watchful. The sky above them stretched without limit. The earth below cradled every seed, every dream. In that dawn of humanity, everything was possible. The gods waited, and so did fate. The chains had not yet fallen, but they would. For even in freedom, the first threads of destiny had begun to weave. The dawn rose softer, painted in gold and pale rose. Mortals stirred with energy, their eyes bright with new desires. They no longer only sought food, shelter, or warmth. They dreamed of building higher, faster, stronger than before. Their fires burned longer into the night. Voices filled with plans. Hammers struck stone, carving shapes beyond simple necessity. Children played not with sticks, but with tools of invention. The old songs of gratitude grew fainter, replaced by ambition. Zeus watched, seated upon his throne, clouds curling at his feet. His eyes saw deeper than mortals could imagine. Every spark of invention carried promise, but also danger. What begins as curiosity can grow into hunger without end. The whisper of responsibility touched his heart like wind. It reminded him of balance, a law older than Olympus. Everything given by nature must be honored in return. But mortals did not yet know this truth. They raced forward, eager to conquer, eager to command. They spoke of bending rivers, shaping forests, claiming stars. Zeus leaned into the silence, listening to their restless talk. Each word was like a ripple across the fabric of fate. He knew their ambition could create wonders or disasters. A single choice could light a village or burn a valley. Yet he did not raise thunder or call storms. Instead, he pondered how best to guide them gently. The chains of law had not yet been forged, but the first threads of wisdom were ready to weave. Zeus thought of Prometheus, who once brought fire to men. That gift had changed everything, sparking courage and defiance. What other gift might now help them understand balance? Not a weapon, not a tool, but a lesson. Mortals needed reminders that freedom was never without weight. Every step forward should carry reflection in its shadow. The whisper of responsibility grew stronger in Zeus's chest. He summoned a breeze, carrying dreams to mortal sleep. In those dreams, mortals saw golden scales in the sky. One side carried gifts, the other carried choices. If gifts were taken without care, the scales tipped heavy. If choices were guided by kindness, the scales glowed light. Many awoke troubled, unsure of what the vision meant. Some elders spoke of warnings from the gods. Others dismissed the dream as mere shadow of sleep. But a few listened, truly listened, with reverent hearts. They gathered their people and spoke of balance. "Every gift must be honored," said one elder softly. "The rains that feed us, the fire that warms us. If we take without thanks, the sky will grow heavy. But if we give back, the earth will stay kind." The people were divided, some laughing, some nodding. Still, the whisper had been planted in their minds. Zeus watched the small conversations bloom like hidden seeds. Not all would listen, but some had begun to see. The responsibility of mortals was not a burden, but a bond. It connected them to sky, to earth, to each other. Zeus smiled faintly, for patience was his choice. He would not chain them with iron or fear. He would guide them with visions, with reminders, with light. The whisper of responsibility spread slowly, like dawn across hills. Not loud, not forceful, but steady and enduring. Some mortals learned, some resisted, yet all were touched. The gods spoke of it in hushed tones upon Olympus. Athena praised the wisdom of planting thought, not fear. Hermes doubted, saying mortals love freedom too much. But Hera nodded, knowing balance must come with time. Zeus raised his hand and silenced their quarrel. "The world is young," he said, voice calm and steady. "They must walk their path, but they will not walk blind." And so the whisper lingered in mortal hearts. It was unseen, but it guided choices like an invisible hand. The chains were not yet formed, but their shape was near. In the restless nights of humanity, responsibility had spoken, and the first echoes of destiny stirred within their dreams. The sky was wide, yet Zeus felt its weight upon his shoulders. Mortals were restless, their hearts chasing dreams beyond measure. Each day they shaped stone, bent wood, and tamed fields. They rejoiced, but they rarely paused to consider the cost. The balance whispered softly, but few listened long enough. Zeus knew freedom alone was not enough to guide them. He thought of ways to teach without chains of iron. The answer came as bonds unseen, threads no eye could trace. These bonds would not cut flesh or break bone. They would live in promises, in truth, in the passing of time. The first bond was the bond of nature. It tied mortals to rivers, to forests, to the winds. If they honored the earth, she would nourish them. If they forgot her, the bond would tighten silently. Crops would wither, rains would delay, harmony would falter. The second bond was the bond of truth. Zeus placed it in their hearts like a hidden flame. When mortals kept their word, the flame burned bright. When they betrayed trust, the flame dimmed and grew heavy. Their own hearts would carry the weight of broken vows. The third bond was the bond of time. It reminded mortals they were fleeting, yet meaningful. Every breath was a gift, every hour a treasure. To waste life in greed or cruelty was to weaken the bond. To live with kindness was to strengthen it beyond measure. These bonds were invisible, yet stronger than iron chains. They could not be broken by force or rebellion. They existed in silence, shaping the path of humanity. Zeus tested them first with gentle signs. A village that honored rivers found fish plentiful. A town that broke promises saw quarrels tear them apart. A people that cherished life found joy even in hardship. Those who scorned the bonds felt emptiness in their triumphs. The gods watched, curious at Zeus's unseen creation. Athena nodded, pleased by wisdom wrapped in mystery. Hermes smirked, doubting mortals would notice such subtle threads. Hera, careful and watchful, whispered that time would prove all. Zeus said nothing, but his gaze stretched over valleys. He watched mortals laugh, argue, dream, and falter. The bonds pulled gently, never punishing, only reminding. Some mortals began to sense the threads in their lives. They spoke of unseen rules that shaped fortune and sorrow. A mother told her child to keep promises, for the sky listens. A farmer poured water back to the river in gratitude. A young man chose kindness, knowing time's bond would honor him. Whispers spread, quiet yet steady, of invisible laws. Not laws carved on stone, but laws carried in the heart. Zeus smiled faintly, for this was what he desired. Chains of iron could break, but bonds of spirit endured. Mortals would not see them, yet they would feel them. When they walked with care, life grew lighter. When they forgot, the bonds grew heavy as shadow. These invisible bonds were not curses, but reminders. They did not punish, they revealed. They showed mortals the weight of their own choices. For every gift, there is a balance. For every step, there is a path unseen. The invisible bonds became the quiet companions of humanity. They were bridges, not shackles. Connections, not cages. Zeus knew some would resist, but many would learn. In the silence of night, dreams carried hints of bonds. Threads of light glowed in visions, weaving earth and sky. Mortals awoke, unsettled, yet strangely comforted. They began to sense they were never truly alone. The bonds tied them not only to gods, but to each other. Thus the chains of mortals were born, yet not as chains at all. They were the threads of destiny, unseen, unbroken, eternal. Zeus leaned back, clouds folding around him like robes. The world below glimmered with the first sparks of wisdom, and the bonds, though unseen, began to sing softly through time. Night draped the earth in silence, and mortals fell into sleep. Their dreams were not empty, but touched by whispers from above. Zeus, gazing down from Olympus, wove visions into their rest. He did not strike with thunder or command with fear. Instead, he spoke through symbols, soft as moonlight on water. Mortals dreamed of golden threads stretching from sky to earth. Each thread shimmered with a glow, fragile yet eternal. Voices in the dreams spoke. These threads are promises. Some woke startled, their hearts heavy with wonder. Others woke smiling, believing the visions were blessings. Zeus did not reveal all, but gave glimpses of truth. He spoke of balance, of choices carried like stones. Every gift bears weight, the dream voice whispered in calm tones. Every promise you keep strengthens the bond to the sky. Every vow broken pulls shadows into your days. Mortals listened in dreams, though few remembered fully at dawn. Still, fragments of the visions lingered like dew upon grass. A farmer woke and felt gratitude for the soil's patience. A mother reminded her children to honor words as treasure. A young hunter chose to spare a deer, hearing unseen counsel. The whispers spread slowly, hidden in simple acts of care. Villages began to tell stories of promises made to gods, not of fearsome punishment, but of harmony when vows were kept. Zeus saw these seeds of wisdom take root in humble lives. He was pleased, for promises are bridges between heaven and earth. The gods watched and spoke quietly among themselves. Athena praised the clarity of truth shared through dreams. Hermes laughed, saying mortals would twist even promises into games. Hera, steady and watchful, said time would test their loyalty. But Zeus remained calm, for patience was his chosen path. He knew promises are not iron chains, but invisible music. When sung with care, they bring harmony to every heart. When neglected, they fade, leaving silence and discord. He continued to send visions during nights of quiet stars. Some mortals dreamed of scales weighing truth against lies. Others dreamed of rivers that grew dry when gratitude was lost. Still, others dreamed of fires dimming when promises were broken. Each vision carried a lesson, gentle but firm. Not all listened, but enough remembered to spread the word. Elders gathered children and told them of the Sky Father. He does not bind with chains, they whispered near the fire. He binds with promises, with threads no eye can break. Children repeated the tales with awe, planting hope in tomorrow. Thus the idea of sacred vows grew among the people. Marriages were blessed with prayers to the shining threads above. Trades were sealed with oaths spoken under the open sky. Even disputes ended with promises sworn before rivers and winds. Zeus saw mortals slowly weaving responsibility into daily life. The golden threads glowed brighter with each act of honesty. When mortals faltered, the threads dimmed, but never vanished. They waited patiently, ready to shine once trust was restored. Promises became more than words. They became lifelines of faith. A broken promise was felt not only by gods, but by hearts. The weight of dishonor grew heavy, teaching without thunder. And so mortals learned, step by step, the value of their word. Zeus smiled faintly as clouds shifted around his throne. He had given no weapons, no punishment, only reminders. Yet the world below shimmered with growing understanding. The chains of mortals were being shaped, not in iron, but in vows. Threads stretched from sky to earth, delicate and enduring. Promises became the silent covenant between humanity and the heavens. And the voice of Zeus lingered softly in dreams. Honor what is given, cherish what is kept, and walk in balance. Thus the sky itself became a mirror of promise. Every star a witness, every dawn a reminder. And the people began to carry their invisible bonds with pride. At first, the bonds shimmered softly, and mortals lived with ease. They sowed fields, shared harvests, and offered prayers to the sky. The promises of the gods were remembered at dawn and dusk. But as years passed, the glow of gratitude began to fade. Mortals grew bold, testing the invisible bonds that guided them. They wondered if the threads could be broken or ignored. Some mocked the old stories, laughing at elders near the fire. They said the gods were distant, their whispers only dreams. Others claimed promises were chains meant to hold men small. The bonds were unseen, and so they doubted their weight. A young leader rose in one village, ambitious and clever. He spoke of bending rivers, cutting forests, and ruling with might. He promised freedom from fear of gods or unseen threads. His words carried fire, and many followed his call. For a time, they thrived, building walls, hoarding wealth. But the balance began to shift, though none noticed at first. Rains grew late, the river thinned, crops withered in the fields. Promises once spoken were broken, and trust frayed in silence. Neighbors quarreled over land, brothers argued over inheritance. The golden threads, though invisible, began to feel heavier, not as punishment, but as the echo of neglect. Zeus watched from Olympus, his face shadowed with thought. He did not summon thunder, nor call the storm. Instead, he let the bonds reveal their silent weight. Mortals who lied felt unease, their hearts restless at night. Those who betrayed vows found joy slipping like sand through fingers. The ambitious leader sat upon his throne, but felt hollow. His voice grew louder, but his people grew weary. The first strain of the bonds had appeared among mortals, not chains of iron, but consequences woven into daily life. Athena saw the struggle and leaned toward Zeus with care. They will learn, she said, through the weight of their choices. Hermes chuckled, though his tone held less mirth than before. Mortals are quick to forget, yet quick to suffer their folly. Hera's eyes softened as she gazed at the fading village. "Even a child learns after touching flame," she whispered. Zeus remained still, clouds heavy around his throne. He knew the bonds were working as they were meant, not to punish, but to remind, to balance, to teach. Mortals began to whisper again of dreams with golden scales. Some remembered the voice that warned of promises kept. Elders rose once more, urging a return to balance. "Do not laugh at the sky," one woman said firmly. "Each vow you break weighs not only on you but on us all." Her words carried weight, and a few listened with care. The ambitious leader scoffed, declaring chains were illusions, but he could not explain the withering fields or restless nights. The people began to doubt his promises, their trust unraveling. Slowly, they remembered the old wisdom of gratitude and truth. Small offerings returned, songs rose again at twilight. A farmer poured wine to the river, asking for mercy. A child promised to honor his word, and kept it. The bond stirred, faint glimmers of light weaving once more. The strain did not vanish, but hope began to grow. Zeus saw this, and allowed patience to guide his hand. He knew mortals must stumble before they found their strength. The first strain of the bonds had been a test, not of faith alone, but of humanity's will to remember. The gods watched silently as the village chose its path. Some would fall, some would rise. Yet, the lesson endured. For even the heaviest chain was only the weight of choice, and mortals, fragile yet resilient, began to feel its truth. The bonds shimmered unseen, stretching from earth to sky. They reminded all who lived beneath the heavens. Every gift carries weight. Every promise carries light. And when forgotten, the first strain is only the beginning. On Olympus, the gods gathered beneath pillars of shining stone. The air hummed with tension, a chorus of voices rising. They had watched the strain of promises ripple through the earth. Some felt pity, others amusement, and some burned with concern. Athena spoke first, her voice steady as flowing water. "Mortals learn through struggle, yet the balance wavers dangerously." Now, she recalled their dreams, the golden threads, the warnings of balance. They must be guided before the strain tears bonds apart. Hermes leaned casually, wings at his heels flickering like sparks. "Why worry so much?" he said with a mischievous grin. "Mortals stumble, mortals rise. It has always been their way." But his laughter rang hollow, for he too felt the shift. Hera's voice followed, rich and stern like the heartbeat of order. "Promises are not games. They define trust, loyalty, and union." She looked down at the villages, their fading harmony visible to her. If mortals forget, they unravel not only themselves, but us. Poseidon, leaning on his trident, rumbled like the deep sea. The rivers shrink, the tides grow restless, storms churn in silence. Mortals think only of land, yet their folly stirs the oceans. His eyes narrowed, the weight of his domain pressing heavy. Demeter, sorrowful, lifted her hands as though holding wilted grain. The fields suffer because gratitude is forgotten. Where reverence fades, so too does the earth's abundance. Her tears glistened like dew, and the council grew quiet. Ares, impatient, clenched his fist, though without malice this time. "Why bind them with promises?" he asked. "Let them live unchained. Struggle is their true teacher, not whispers or threads." But Athena shook her head, her gaze unwavering. "Struggle without wisdom is chaos. Chaos consumes even the strong." Zeus finally rose, his presence silencing the echoing chamber. He looked upon his fellow gods, his eyes calm but stern. "The bonds are not punishments, nor are they cages. They are bridges between us and those who walk below. They must endure strain, yes, but not collapse entirely." He raised his hand, and the chamber dimmed into silence. The golden threads shimmered into view, crisscrossing the air. Each strand pulsed faintly, a song of mortal promises. Some glowed bright, strong with loyalty and truth. Others flickered weakly, near breaking under neglect and pride. The gods watched in awe at the fragile, radiant web. "This is what binds heaven and earth," Zeus said softly. "It is delicate, but it is alive. Every mortal choice weaves into this tapestry of light. The council murmured, each god seeing both their power and frailty. Hestia, quiet until now, finally spoke with warmth and clarity. The hearths of mortals flicker as these threads flicker. When homes hold truth, the bonds glow. When homes lie empty, the threads grow dim. Her words touched them all, simple yet profound. Zeus nodded, his voice now resolute. Then let us not strike, nor destroy, but remind. Mortals must remember not through fear, but through presence. He turned to Hermes with a commanding glance. You will carry new whispers, lighter than dreams, but sharper than silence, to remind mortals that every word they give is sacred. He turned to Demeter and Poseidon. You will stir the fields and waters gently, not with wrath, but with warning. Let them see the reflection of their choices in the world around them. At last, he looked to Athena and Hera. You will guard the oaths of leaders and families. Teach them that promises hold not just weight, but legacy. The council agreed, their voices blending like a chorus of winds. The golden threads pulsed brighter, as though hearing their resolve. The earth below stirred with faint ripples of change. Mortals would soon feel the echoes of the gods' new guidance. Not chains, not punishments, but gentle, persistent reminders. For the bonds of mortals were fragile, yet precious. And though the strain was real, so too was their resilience. Thus the Council of Echoes ended, not with thunder, but with promise. And the threads between heaven and earth glowed faintly in the night. The council's resolve echoed through the heavens like a soft tide. From that night forward, the winds carried more than air. They carried reminders, subtle and quiet, threading into mortal lives. Hermes, swift and unseen, danced across valleys and rivers. He whispered through reeds, rustled leaves, and stirred sleeping fires. His voice was playful, but each word held meaning. Keep your word, he murmured into the ear of a shepherd. Truth is weight, but it carries you farther than lies. The shepherd woke, uneasy, and chose honesty at the market. A simple choice, yet it glowed upon the golden threads. Demeter sent her touch through the soil and seeds. Crops responded differently depending on gratitude and care. Fields tended with reverence grew green and abundant, but land neglected with arrogance sprouted thin and fragile stalks. Farmers noticed, whispering about the link between heart and harvest. Some mocked the idea, yet others began to bow at dawn. They offered a portion of bread, not in fear but in respect. Poseidon worked in silence, stirring tides and rivers gently. A fisherman ignored his oath and cast nets beyond promise. The sea grew restless, tossing his boat until he turned back. He remembered his vow and whispered apology into the waves. The waters calmed, and his nets filled with silver fish. He returned home, humbled, telling his children to honor oaths. The whispers spread not as commandments, but as echoes. Mortals began to sense that their choices shaped the world. Every truth spoken seemed to make life brighter and kinder. Every broken vow left shadows, subtle but impossible to deny. At twilight, elders reminded youth of the threads in the sky. Promises are bridges, they said, invisible but strong. Children listened, tracing stars with their fingers, dreaming of bonds. Yet not all welcomed the whispers of gods. Some leaders found the reminders burdensome to their desires. They sought power through cunning, bending oaths like reeds. One such chieftain silenced dreamers and mocked the golden threads. Promises are chains, he told his people. Only the bold break free to rule. His words stirred rebellion against the old wisdom. He rose in influence, his voice louder than whispers of wind. But his village began to fracture, though few noticed at first. Neighbors distrusted each other, bargains dissolved, and families quarreled. The threads above dimmed, their light faltering over his land. Zeus observed quietly, his patience deep as endless sky. He did not strike, but his gaze weighed heavily on Olympus. Athena leaned close and said, his people will learn. They must taste the fruit of broken words before they awaken. Zeus agreed, for lessons forced were lessons lost. Instead, he let the whispers grow louder in gentler lands. In valleys where gratitude thrived, bonds shone brighter each season. Songs rose again, sung at hearths and harvest feasts. Children repeated the whispers as though they were rhymes. Truth is light, oaths are bridges, promises bind hearts. The words passed from lip to lip, becoming living wisdom. Mortals began to sense an unseen balance guiding their lives. Even storms and droughts felt less cruel when vows were honored. Trust spread like fire in kind villages, warming all. In such places, the golden threads shimmered strong and unbroken, and the gods above felt the harmony like music. Yet far away, shadows gathered in villages ruled by pride. The whispers were ignored, twisted, or silenced by fear. The contrast grew sharper as night and day upon the earth. Hermes carried the news back to Zeus in quiet tones. Some listen, some mock. The balance hangs in between. Zeus gazed into the horizon, clouds shifting around him. They will choose, he said, and choice is the heart of freedom. He knew mortals would walk paths both bright and shadowed. But so long as whispers filled the wind, hope endured. The bonds would strain, bend, even dim, but not vanish. For every true word spoken was a thread renewed, and each promise kept was a star glowing in the sky. The whispers of God spread like threads through the wind. In some lands they glowed bright, guiding mortals with care. But in others, they faded, swallowed by pride and greed. The chieftain who mocked the golden bonds grew stronger still. His people feared him, though many pretended loyalty. He promised them riches, freedom, and power, without consequence. "Why kneel to invisible threads?" he cried to the crowd. "The sky does not chain us. We chain ourselves with fear." The villagers shouted in agreement, though unease stirred inside. Zeus watched, his gaze steady, neither angered nor blind. He had seen mortals blinded by pride before. Yet this time, the chains they broke were not of war. They were promises, quiet bonds that held life in balance. Each broken vow dimmed the threads above their land. Fields wilted, rivers narrowed, laughter thinned into silence. Still, the chieftain declared himself chosen, above gods and fate. He built monuments of stone, carving his name into walls. But cracks spread quickly, no matter how often he repaired. His followers whispered doubts in the dark of night. A mother told her child, "Do not forget the promises." But her words were hushed, drowned by the leader's speeches. Athena turned to Zeus with solemn eyes. Pride blinds him. He forgets that even kings stand on vows. Hermes, listening from afar, sighed with weary amusement. He thinks himself clever, yet shadows gather in his house. Demeter grieved for the withered fields left untended. Poseidon stirred uneasily, for rivers carried whispers of discontent. The gods saw the unraveling thread, but they did not strike. They had agreed. Reminders, not wrath, would guide mortals. So whispers grew louder in the lands of humility. Villages that honored vows flourished with abundance. Children laughed by streams, and bread filled every table. Travelers carried tales of glowing threads that blessed the faithful. The proud chieftain heard these stories and raged in secret. He accused his people of weakness, of longing for chains. "Do not be fooled by tricks of sky and soil," he cried. But his words could not warm the hearts of his people. They saw the difference between his land and others. Their fields barren, their rivers shrinking, their joy stolen. A young woman stood in the village square one dawn. She spoke not with anger, but with quiet conviction. "We are not chained by the sky," she said. "We are chained by broken promises, by our own neglect." Her words spread like sparks among weary villagers. Some turned their gaze upward, seeking the golden threads, and in their hearts they remembered the whispers of truth. The chieftain grew furious, declaring her a traitor. But the people no longer cheered his anger. They began to walk away, one by one, in silence. His voice grew louder, but his power grew thin. Zeus watched the shift with calm certainty. Mortals could not be forced into wisdom, but they could awaken. The threads above flickered faintly, beginning to glow again. Not from fear, but from choices made with care. The proud chieftain sat alone, his throne heavy with emptiness. He had wealth, monuments, and walls, but no trust. The god said nothing, for silence was the greatest lesson. In silence, he heard the hollowness of his promises. In silence, his people rebuilt trust without him. The shadows of pride lingered, but they no longer ruled. Instead, whispers of truth carried from village to village. Children repeated them. Elders guarded them. Families lived them. Promises are bridges. Truth is light. Oaths bind hearts. And so, even in lands once darkened by arrogance, the golden threads began to shimmer once more. Not fully healed, not unbroken, but alive with hope. Zeus smiled faintly, for mortals had remembered. And remembering was the first step to rising again. The seasons turned, and with them came a time of gathering. Villages across the valleys prepared for a grand festival. It was not decreed by kings, nor ordered by priests. It began with whispers carried from hearth to hearth. "Let us honor the bonds that hold us," said the elders. "Let us weave a day of truth and remembrance." The idea spread, bright as fire, jumping from torch to torch. Soon, every community prepared their own small offerings. Children painted stars on cloth to mimic the sky. Mothers baked loaves and shaped them into braided circles. Fathers carved wooden figures, each tied with golden string. When the day came, the air shimmered with anticipation. People walked from distant hamlets, carrying gifts and song. At the center of the valley, a great fire was lit. Not to burn offerings, but to warm gathered hearts. Around it, villagers placed tokens of promises kept. A boy placed his flute, carved after he kept his word. A woman placed a seed, symbol of a vow to nurture. A fisherman placed a net, mended after years of truth. Each item told a story of bonds renewed by choice. The gods above leaned forward, listening through the smoke. Hermes laughed softly, dancing on the wind with joy. "See how they weave their own stories into ours," he said. Demeter smiled, for the loaves smelled sweet and rich. Poseidon rumbled with approval as streams echoed with music. Athena's eyes shone with pride at the wisdom unfolding. And Zeus, high on Olympus, let his silence speak. He did not thunder. He did not strike with lightning. Instead, he allowed the fire below to be their beacon. The people sang songs that spoke of bridges and stars. They told children tales of promises that healed the earth. They reminded one another that trust was stronger than pride. The threads above shimmered more brightly than in years past. Some said the stars themselves danced in celebration. Others claimed they heard voices of gods in the wind, but most simply felt lighter, as if chains had lifted. The festival became more than a single night. It spread year after year, carried to far-off lands. Travelers returned home with stories of glowing bonds. New villages lit fires, shared bread, and sang of oaths. Even lands once darkened by arrogance began to soften. Not all changed, but seeds of trust found fertile ground. Children grew with the festival as part of their lives. They learned that a word carried weight beyond measure. They learned that promises were not chains, but bridges. And that bridges connected not only people, but past and future. The chieftain who once mocked the threads lived to see it. He sat on his throne, forgotten, listening to distant songs, his heart heavy. He remembered the day he mocked the sky. For the first time, he wondered what it meant to vow, but the people no longer feared him, nor sought his voice. They had found their strength in each other, not in rulers. Zeus looked upon this and felt the balance restored. Not perfectly, for mortals would always falter and rise again. But the festival showed him they could choose light willingly. They did not need chains of fear to guide their steps. They only needed reminders, woven into stories and song. At the fire's end, elders stood and raised their voices. "Promises are stars," they said, "shining even in night. Truth is a river, flowing steady through every land. Oaths are threads, unseen yet binding us all together." The crowd repeated the words until they became a chorus. The valley echoed with the sound of countless voices united. And above them, the golden threads shimmered brighter still. Zeus whispered to the wind, his words soft as mist. "May they never forget the chains that bind are chosen." And the night closed not with fear, but with hope. Hope woven into every promise, every bridge, every thread. The festival fires dimmed, but the echoes lingered in the valleys. Songs carried on the wind, weaving into dreams of children. Promises spoken at dawn now carried weight across generations. The golden threads above no longer flickered faintly. They stretched strong and bright, connecting villages, hearts, and hopes. Zeus stood at the peak of Olympus, watching in silence. He knew this balance would not last forever. Mortals would stumble again, as they always had. They would falter, forget, and sometimes choose shadows. But they would also remember, rebuild, and rise once more. Athena placed her hand upon Zeus's arm. "Wisdom grows not from perfection, but from struggle," she said. Hermes leapt upon a cloud, grinning with delight. "And stories," he added, "for mortals will always need stories." Demeter smiled, her gaze drifting toward fertile fields. "Let them taste the sweetness of bonds kept true," she whispered. Poseidon rumbled with quiet laughter from the depths below. "The rivers will remind them even when they resist." The gods had agreed. They would not chain mortals with fear. Instead, they would guard the whispers, light and gentle bonds. Mortals would decide their own path, step by step. Some would stumble into pride, but others would choose truth. And in that choosing, the golden threads would live. Far below, children gathered around hearths in quiet villages. They listened to elders tell tales of Zeus and the chains. Not chains of iron, but chains of trust and promise. Not shackles, but bridges binding heart to heart. "Remember," said the elders, their voices steady and warm, "the gods do not rule with whips or blades. They rule with reminders, whispers, and the weight of oaths. The chains you wear are the ones you forge. And the strongest chains are those of truth and love." The children's eyes widened. Stars reflected in their gaze. They believed, not out of fear, but out of wonder. And belief, gentle and true, wove stronger than any decree. The sky above shimmered brighter each night, they remembered. In one village, a young boy whispered a vow. "I will care for the orchard as my father once did." The trees flourished, their fruit feeding generations to come. In another village, a woman promised to keep a song alive. Her voice carried over mountains, teaching strangers the old words. Every promise, no matter how small, left a trace of light. The threads shimmered, linking ordinary lives to divine echoes. Zeus gazed at the woven tapestry of mortal choices. It stretched across earth and sky, fragile yet enduring. He raised his hand, not to strike, but to bless. The wind stirred, carrying his whisper across the world. "Chains of mortals, may you bind not in burden, but in love." The whisper passed through valleys, rivers, and starry nights. It slipped into dreams, planting seeds of quiet strength. And so, the tale of Zeus and the chains endured, not as warning, but as promise of what could be. Every generation retold it, shaping it in new words. Some spoke of stars, others of bridges, others of golden threads, but the heart remained the same in every telling, that freedom and chains were not opposites, but companions. That to be free was also to be bound, bound by choice, by love, by truth spoken and kept. The gods smiled, for their whispers had become songs. Songs became memory, and memory became tradition. And tradition became chains of light that no pride could break. In the end, Zeus did not need thunder to rule. He needed only the faith mortals placed in their vows. And so long as promises were kept beneath the stars, the golden threads would never fade from the sky. The chains of mortals would remain eternal, unseen yet unbroken. Not chains of oppression, but chains of belonging and hope. Zeus closed his eyes, listening to the chorus below. A chorus of voices bound not by fear, but by choice. And in that harmony, Olympus found its lasting peace.